Welcome, sports fans, to GenX Classic Sports, where we bring the nostalgia of our sports-filled youth into the present day. Grab your favorite retro jersey, crack open a cold one, and let's stroll down memory lane together. We're here to discuss iconic sports moments, teams, and athletes from our generation. This is GenX Classic Sports, sports talk for Gen Xers by Gen Xers.
Hello, folks, and welcome back to part 2 of our GenX Classic Sports Movie series, where we're covering Friday Night Lights. And just to catch you up really quickly on what was going on before, the Odessa Permian Panthers have pretty much finished up the regular season, and where we pick up part 2, we're winding down the regular season and we're heading into the playoffs. Thank you very much for joining us, and let's pick back up with Friday Night Lights.
So they lose that game to Midland Lee. Get this, 14-7, and they now have 2 losses on the season, which is, lots of teams go 8-2. They're throwing a parade, especially if they make the playoffs. But the problem with them is they've now gone 8-2 and may not make the playoffs, and that's just not good for Coach Gaines at all. So that puts them in a 3-way tie for the playoff spot. And even though this was Texas, there was only 2 playoff teams per conference. So this was to decide the first place team and the second place team, because 3 different teams had the same amount of losses. So y'all remember the scene with Gaines and Winchell driving to the truck stop to flip the coin after the game. They have to go flip.
Right.
They have to go flip the coin after the game. Y'all remember Winchell and Gaines riding together in the car?
I do, but I don't remember the conversation much, other than Winchell saying something about being cursed.
Exactly.
He feels like he's been cursed his whole life.
That's correct. Winchell asked the coach, says, "You ever felt like you just have a curse on you and you can't do anything right," kind of thing. So they have that whole deep.
Back on that Midland League game, Winchell in the movie he had an open receiver throwing for a touchdown, and he threw it high on the last play of the game. So that's probably goes towards his lack of confidence or his insecurities, or hurts his insecurities anyway.
That's correct. And
then the next scene he's in the car. Well, after the football scene.
Yeah, they make sure to play the DJs talking on the radio while Winchell's riding with Gaines, and they're both just getting blasted, and they're both sitting there having to listen to it. I guess they choose to. And so, 8-2, got to go flip a coin. So when I saw the movie again recently, first thing I thought was there's no way a state like Texas would decide their playoffs situation with a coin toss. This has to be done just for the movie. And boy, was I wrong. So I'm going to jump out of the movie for a second, because it's important to point out that is exactly how it was settled, with a coin toss. Here's what's really funny. It was a secret location. The media would not tell anybody where the coin toss was, because they were scared they would have riots. Because three teams were going to walk into what turned out to be an interstate cafe, all-night diner. I bet they had good food too, because all those places have good food. They were gonna they were gonna flip this coin, and 3 teams were coming in, and 1 team was going to leave very, very unhappy, and the state troopers would not let them televise or announce where the secret meeting was, because they were scared of rioting by hundreds, if not thousands, of fans that would show up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Wow.
So
now they left that part out in the movie. They did say it was an undisclosed location. The media said that, but they didn't say it's because of rioting. I didn't think about that.
So that's true. That really happened, and it was live on television. You can go to YouTube right now, and I'll probably put a link to it in our YouTube episode of this. You can go to YouTube right now and watch that coin toss just like it aired that night. It was on live Texas. It was on live Texas television.
Wow, that is crazy.
So the coin toss, 2 of the participants were Permian and Midland Lee again, and I don't know who the third team was, but doesn't really matter.
Cooper, wasn't it? Something
May
Cooper?
have been. So as soon as that happens, by the way, I was wrong earlier. This is the road trip home that Billingsley's dad throws the ring out the window. Doesn't matter. It happened. His dad kicked the windows out, threw the ring out. So that happened this time. This is the first time in the movie we hear about Dallas Carter after the coin toss. And so who's Dallas Carter in all of
Yeah,
this?
they're the enemy.
They're the best team in Texas.
Obviously, best team in Texas in the movie. Powerhouse out of um urban portion of Dallas.
Yep.
Lots of well, I say lots, several future college and maybe a couple of NFL
Ever
players
heard
on the team.
ever heard of Jesse Armstead? He was on that team.
Yep.
Okay,
There were some grown men in that movie.
definitely. They were okay. So they were the best thing in Texas. They played their home games at Texas Stadium. They were known for their size, and while we're talking about that, they didn't make this point in the movie like they should have. Permian was known for not having any size. Traditionally, Permian had smaller players, linemen and everything. That was their whole deal. They were tougher than you. They were in better shape than you because they practiced out in the heat or whatever. So did the other Texas teams. We know that. But Permian's their whole deal was being tough because they were not big. So Dallas Carter, they did a good job in the movie of showing how much bigger that team was than Permian for sure. Okay, and by the way, they were 5A in Texas, and I think I read that there were 2,400 kids in high school, and that was only big enough to be 5A in Texas. That's a big high school.
Lee, geez, bigger than the town we grew up in.
Yeah,
What?
yeah.
I don't know what Arkansas's biggest high school is, but it's probably a little more than half of that.
Well, yeah. I mean, especially since Rogers and a bunch of those split in half, it would have been.
Right.
But anyway, so they get to the playoffs, and they more or less just. Oh, by the way, after we find out who Carter is, there's a scene where Booby is cleaning out his locker, and Comer watches him. And the implication, of course, is Booby's done. He's had enough. He's his knees done, and therefore he's done. So he packs his locker. Comer's watching him, but so does Winchell and Billingsley, and the defensive, was he a defensive end or a safety? Chavez was one of their best tacklers, defenders, and he was
Right.
watching.
Defensive end,
The
Yeah.
line or the defensive end. Okay.
linebacker or something like that.
Well,
Outside
they had the
linebacker.
guy they called Preacher that played linebacker too, and then they had, I think,
Right.
anyway. So Booby's done. So then they kind of montage their way in the movie through 1, 2, 3, 4 playoff wins. You don't really see a lot of details about it, and that puts them in the finals against, of course, Dallas Carter. So we're getting close to the end. I'm probably wearing y'all out. So Dallas
No.
Carter's up next in the finals in the movie. So then what happens between Dallas Carter officials and the coach and Permian officials and the coach? Y'all remember that scene? We know they're in the finals against each other. What happens before that?
So they,
Before the
uh,
game,
Yeah. What do they have to decide on?
you
What all
know,
has to be decided?
well,
they're gonna
first of
decide
all,
what the officials are using.
Well,
yeah,
not only that, what else other than the officials?
neutral
The
site.
location.
The site, because neither team wanted to play at the other team's home
Okay. So
stadium.
that happened in the movie, and while I'm sitting, if you'll remember, the coach and a principal and some lawyers get off the plane, and Coach Gaines and his principal and whoever, athletic director, they're waiting on them. So it's like 5 guys from each school, and they get in a little conference room at the airport. And when I'm watching that, I'm thinking this is completely made up for the movie. There's no way the state handled it like this. That's why you have Activities Association in Arkansas and whatever they call the equivalent of that. This stuff should have been decided beforehand, right?
Mm-hmm.
No,
Yeah.
that's
No, is
that's
that not right?
exactly what happened in the book. That is exactly what happened in the book. So they said
Wow.
normally this happens over a phone call. And I'm wondering if it's because of the size of the crowds, and that tended to lend it to going to these college and pro stadiums and stuff. Normally they make a phone call and they settle it. Dallas Carter is like, nope, we're doing this in person. They fly to Midland. Odessa Permian officials meet them in Midland, and they wanted to hatch out the location and the officials. And so there's a whole discussion where they're not really saying what they want to say about who's going to be officiating, because there's a whole white and there's a black school and a white school, a mostly white school involved in all of this,
Right.
and they're wanting fairness, both teams. I found it really interesting though in the movie. What stadium did they decide on?
The Astrodome.
Yep. In the movie, they decided on the Astrodome. In real life, that's not what happened, but in the movie, they decided on the Astrodome. And they had an argument about referees, and they ended up making sure that the referees were racially balanced, because Dallas Carter was afraid of that. They didn't want to be on an all-white crew, and Permian agreed. And I think they said they picked referees out of San Antonio or somewhere to be the officials. So everybody was
Yeah,
happy.
totally away.
Everybody was happy with the arrangement. We're going to the Astrodome in the movie, right?
Right.
So we're in the
Right.
finals, and then there's a scene where Gaines comes out of the grocery store with his family. What happens? Y'all remember?
Oh yeah. The booster. Oh, kind of in a not so subtle way, threatened Gaines that if they don't win, it may be rough on Gaines, and Gaines'
Yeah,
future.
Mark, you remember that?
And
Yeah.
The booster is in a convertible with another booster, the two oil guys, I guess. And I don't remember the exact quote, but they exchanged pleasantries, and they said, "We really need you to win this game." And Gaines is like, "Well, yeah, it means a lot to me too." And they said, "Well, it's going to be really rough on you if you don't." That's literally, I think they said it's
Right.
going to be rough on you if you don't, kind of thing.
yeah, it
Right.
says it's gonna be rough on you.
Wow. So in a 2-hour movie, the fans 3 times have told the coach now how to do his job.
You don't think that
And the
happens now?
No, we totally know it does. I know. But it's fun to see it play out in a movie, right?
Right.
Okay, so
I think Gaines's wife in the movie after that little interaction when they were walking away, I think she sarcastically said that was
yeah,
subtle. Which I thought that was kind of
yeah,
funny, because wasn't anything
right,
subtle about
right,
it to
right,
me.
right. Okay, so they play each other in the finals, and we don't have to go blow by blow and play by play on that. But so in the movie, they play they get behind quickly, and then they catch up, and it's very dramatic, and it's nothing like what happened in real life. But they make it look like Permian, of course, has a big comeback. Oh, before they go, what happens when they're getting on the bus? Y'all remember?
Booby shows up.
Booby
Yeah,
Yeah.
Booby
shows up.
shows up, and Gaines lets him on the bus. So, I mean, how much do you want to talk about the final game? I mean, is it enough to say they came up short? I mean, they had a dramatic flurry there at the end, and they came up short. That's the bottom line, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Bottom line is, I mean, they were totally overmatched, undersized, um,
Intimidated, actually.
intimidated. There was maybe a little dirty play from Dallas Carter and some in the movie. I don't know if that was actually true in real life. I mean, but it was a hard fought game, and you know
They lost.
they came up
Came up
short.
short.
They lost
Um,
like 6 inches short.
yeah. In the movie, they actually look intimidated, but then they kind of play their way out of it. They get a halftime speech or two from a player and the coach, and they come back out and they start doing their own hitting and and so forth. So yeah, it plays out like it should in a movie, except to be honest, in most movies they would just lie and say they won, but at least
Right.
they
You got to have a feel good ending, but that one didn't end
right.
feel good.
Well, and I think we all know, growing up playing ball, you probably learn more from losses than you do wins anyway, right? Or at least.
Right.
That's true.
So yeah, so Winchell comes up short at the end on a scramble and they lose. In the movie, they lose 34-28. He was scrambling for the tie. In the book, they only lost like 14-9, I think. Something like that.
Yeah, I think it was a lot closer. Low scoring game.
And it was in the semifinals in the book. They lost in the semis to Dallas Carter, and they lost
Right.
14-9.
Right.
But hey, 34-28 is much more cinematic. So they come up short. Now we can switch off the movie part of it now and talk about, I guess, what really happened. And most of that, by the way, if you just took the football side of it and said go make a movie out of it, that's what they did. They just changed the semis to the finals and made that a little bit more dramatic. But honestly, the rest of that stuff about the actual football was dead on. I mean, they lost they lost a game or two they shouldn't have. They beat everybody they were supposed to by mercy rule type scores. And they had their hiccup early in the year, and they got Booby hurt in a practice game in real life. It was like a formal scrimmage before the season. It's when
Yeah.
Booby actually got hurt.
In in the movie, uh, I like the fact that they actually it was realistic. The game
It was
scenes,
great.
the everything. I mean, these were real athletes out there in the movie,
Yeah, and
and
Yeah,
it looked
The Winchell character could actually throw a football. He actually looked like a
yeah.
quarterback.
The
yeah,
Sling Blade kid looked like a high school quarterback. I was impressed with the
right,
football.
Yeah.
The football, that's one of my big pet peeves is guys that don't look like they've ever played. They did a really fantastic job making this look like an actual football game going on. And
right.
I found out that the director took actual imagery from real games and dispersed it into the football action when he could. And so there
hmm
is some actual Permian football action in there.
Yeah, but even when the actors were actually,
Yeah, it was
it's not,
great.
it's not, it's not footage from another game.
No, it was great the
I
way
mean, you
they
could,
filmed it. I don't, and I never did find out how they filmed it. But I wouldn't be surprised if they just paid two high schools to show up and scrimmage and put those uniforms on them or something. Plus the actors, you know
uh,
what I mean.
right.
Um, so the season itself played out the same way, except they got beat in the semis. Can I run down a list with you guys of just some more stuff that actually happened now to jump out of the movie a
hmm
little bit? By the way, I love.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about Dallas Carter
No,
after that game
that's
in
its
real
own
life.
whole. I mean, to me, that's a
Okay.
whole thing. I mean, there was a lot of legal problem. Dallas Carter was stripped of the state title after they won it because they won it the next week in real life. They got stripped of it because they had a illegal player. One, they proved one was illegal, but the thought was there were more than that. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah,
And then there's
yeah.
a bigger story.
And there was like 50,000 people that watched that
Yeah.
game.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
crazy.
And so in real life, the game was at the University of Texas Memorial Stadium, by the way. It was not in the Astrodome. And it was in the rain, and Winchell, late in the game, had a key pass he needed to complete, and he said the wet football cost him the completion that would have, whatever, won the game for him or at least kept him alive or whatever. So I
Oh,
thought that
okay.
was interesting. So the airport thing happened, and that happened, and the coin toss both happened, and I would have sworn they were both made up for the movie, and they were not. In real life, when Carter came to Midland, Carter wanted Permian to come to Dallas and play at Texas Stadium, their home, and Permian said, "Fine, but you got to pay us $16,000." And they said, "Why 16,000?" They said, "Because we're going to fly up there, and we need hotel money and flight money, so it's $16,000 to do that." So Carter countered with, Well, we'll play it at your stadium, but we need 8,000 tickets for our fans. And Permian balked at that. They said, "There's no way you're bringing that many people." And they said, "Yeah, we are." Well, and Permian said, "Well, you're not going to do it at our stadium then." So that's when they decided to go to University of Texas. Carter countered their proposal at about their first counter was after Texas Stadium was to go to the Cotton Bowl, which was much closer to their actual neighborhood, their school neighborhood, and Permian didn't want to do that either. So they got the the Memorial Stadium at UT, and they got San Antonio officials. In the actual final game, I'm just going through various things I've written down. In the finals, Winchell, he completed 4 of 24 passes for 57 yards and an interception. But like I said, it was wet at time. I don't know if it rained the whole game, but it was wet. They said that in real life, the Billingsley kid, his dad that Tim McGraw played, he did not win a state title. That was just for the movie. David mentioned that in a text to me, but he did play in the.
Mark
Okay, well
mentioned that.
he was in one of the finals that they lost, but he did not. It was in the 70s. They lost in the finals, so he didn't really win a ring. But his dad's reputation that was implied in the movie was dead on. They said that his dad was the meanest kid that was in Odessa High School. Like, he fought everybody. Like, he got in fights in football games. He fought his teammates. He fought other kids at school. He fought everybody. Like, he had a bad temper. And so, Tim McGraw probably downplayed it, honestly. The book was a New York Times bestseller. It still sells 5,000 copies a month right now, 40 years later, 35 years later.
Grief.
Wow.
And
Wow.
the movie came out in 2004, and the same people that made the movie made the TV series in 2006. I know David has seen it. It's set in a fictional town called Dillon, Texas, and it ran for like 4 or 5 seasons. It had a pretty good run, and I just read
Yeah.
yesterday that they're rebooting it and doing another or another Friday Night Lights TV series. It's coming. They're doing another one. Winchell, the year before, had 1,800 yards passing, so they were expecting good things that season. Okay, I'm just trivia. I'm doing facts.
Comer's real stats that year were pretty good. I don't know. He had to have over 1,000
He had
yards, right?
1,200 yards. He
Filling
had
in for Boogie.
1,200 that season. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
because the next year he really went off.
yeah, um,
He ended up with over, I forgot, I don't know, 3,000 yards or 4,000 yards
yeah,
rushing for his career.
yeah. And so after they lost in '88 in the finals, in the semifinals, they won it in '89. So Permian actually won 3 state titles in the '80s: '80, '84, '89. So head coach Gaines, Billy Bob Thornton, after he won it in '89, he left and he went to Texas Tech as an assistant coach for the Red Raiders.
Yes,
And
I didn't
he
know
went
that.
on and recruited this chump of a linebacker named Zach Thomas to Texas Tech.
Huh. So Gaines only stayed at Permian for 3 years?
Nope. So he goes to Texas Tech, spends a while, and 20 years after he left, Gaines came back to Permian. He
Oh, okay.
returned to Permian and once again as their head coach and athletic director. But his first season back, they went 8-4, and he retired from coaching and went. In 2012, he went back to being just the athletic director and gave the coaching up. So they didn't have the same kind of run with him the second time. I've told you all that. Coach Gaines died in 2022, so he's no longer with us. Anything y'all got to throw in there, just jump in. I'm just going down my list.
Does it say how old he was when he died? Do you have that?
1949.
I don't know about how old he
He was
was.
born in 49, so
He was born in
yeah.
49.
So 50,
So he was in his late 30s, early 40s during this year we're talking about, late 30s.
So yes, Dallas Carter was stripped of the title, and it was given to a school called Converse Judson. That I don't know who that is.
Is that who they beat
in the finals? Yeah.
Okay.
When Booby was a junior, he had rushed for 1,300 yards. That's why they had so much hope in him as a senior.
And and Comer rushed for 1,300 yards in '88?
Yeah, I think he was. Yeah, he had something like that himself. Yeah.
Yeah. What I'm getting at, he was pretty good back himself.
He was very good. I think his deal was he fumbled also. He was a fumbler early in his career, and that's why Booby was out there instead of him. TV series was from 2006 to 2011, so that's a pretty good run for TV. Okay, so in the book, there was an English teacher talking about all of this because there was a whole thing about their grades. And as you can imagine, their grades were not great among the football players. There was an English teacher who said that the budget for the athletic tape at Permian was greater than the budget for the entire English department at the high school.
I don't doubt that. That goes on nowadays.
When Gaines got hired to come to Permian in 86 or 7, whatever it was, he was making $48,000 a year. And that was absolutely scandalous that they were paying a coach that much money because their average teacher was making 30 grand.
You can hear the DJs in the movie mention that during some of their great
and
mention his
salary. And to think now there's coaches in Arkansas make 120 grand. Booby's injury ended up being
teachers don't make nothing like that.
Booby's injury for sure ended up being a torn ACL. Comer had 1,200 yards in '88. I'm sitting here looking at it.
Okay.
Arkansas was recruiting Booby. We talked about that. Booby moved out of his Uncle LV's house the day he returned home from his ACL surgery. They got in an argument and Booby left. And he did not catch the bus to the game like in the movie. He was done. When he walked out, he was done with them. Roy Williams from the Cowboys and Lions, the receiver, not the safety. I think he went to Odessa Permian later on. If it wasn't Odessa, it was one of the schools they played against. I may have written it down wrong, but there was a note in there about that somewhere. Oh, guys, there was a scene in the movie where after the coin toss, either on the way to the coin toss or coming back from it, the fans are calling in while Billy Bob, Coach Gaines, is driving. And at some point, one of the fans says, I'll tell you what the problem is. There's too much learning going on in this school and not enough football. I laughed about that, man. That was good. That was really good. I'm trying to think. I didn't write it down here, but I do remember. So the team, Mark, we talked about how far they had to ride on the bus. They chartered jets to a lot of their games.
Yeah, that's. I was just sitting here reading about that, and
they had a $70,000 budget for travel that season.
Yeah, they went to. I assume like a non-conference game somewhere up in Northeast Texas.
Marshall. They played Marshall.
Marshall, that's it. And they chartered a jet.
It was like $30,000 or something for just that trip alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, they spent 70 grand in chartered flights for a high school. Oh, by the way, that reminds.
That's 1988.
$1988. That's 200 grand now.
Right.
By the way, I found it very interesting in the book and in the movie. They kind of show it, but in the book they mentioned that they had only 55 players on the roster. Now,
right.
What I wonder, does that mean the varsity roster and they had another 55 JVers or sophomores or whatever? Because it was definitely pointed out that you didn't play for Permian until you were a stud as a junior, and then you might get to play as a senior. But sophomores pretty much did not play. So I don't know if that 50 whatever was a traveling varsity squad, but that seems really low for a school with that many players. Or that many students. Early in the movie, Billy Bob or Coach Gaines is talking to him. He says, there's 1,200 boys in this school, and you're the 50 whatever that stuck it out and made it and blah, blah, blah. And the book the book had those same numbers in it.
So at the time, was 5A the biggest classification in
No, I
Texas,
think 6 or 7 wasn't it, Mark?
or 6 or 7 was at the time still? I mean,
Mark.
okay.
I'm not sure. I'm thinking 5A might have
Oh,
been the
okay,
biggest
maybe it was because it's probably changed.
back then. Now they have a 6 and a 7, and they also split them out into divisions within those uh, those
Yeah, they
classifications
do. They
too.
have
I
like
don't.
7-1 and 7-2 for different sizes.
Yeah,
Forgot what I was going to say. Anyway, I like that movie. I like it a lot. I liked it when I first saw it. I've liked it rewatching it 2 times this week now. I've still enjoyed it. I think the football scene, David's laughing because I've seen it twice in a week. Uh I think the football scenes are very realistic for high school football, as opposed to some I could mention that pro sports and movies that look horrible. And I thought they did a really good job with the football part of it. They must have had some coaches on standby to help them script all that stuff.
Speaking of movies that are bad, pro movie or athletic movies are bad. There would be a whole lot more topics of that to talk about than there would be
True,
good
true,
athletic movies for
true.
sure.
We should do an episode on worst actor in a baseball movie, worst actor in a football movie, like athletic looking performance.
Like
right.
zero
Right,
athletic ability,
right.
yes, yes.
Because I know I
Like these people are actors and
yeah.
only actors.
So that's why I found it was interesting. This was interesting. The actors looked appropriate, and the action looked appropriate. And I can't say that about very many
Yeah, that
football movies.
you're right. The action did look appropriate for
And
sure.
I'm telling you, man, Lucas Black, who played Winchell, he looks. I mean, you could buy him as a high school quarterback easily. He looks the part, man.
Yeah. And I saw a picture of the real Winchell, and Lucas Black did look kind of like him. And the same way with Comer, the guy that played him looks like the running back. Pretty close. They did a good job casting those two for
Yeah,
sure.
Right.
for anybody interested, you can go on YouTube and just type Odessa Permian or Friday Night Lights Odessa Permian. There's a lot of videos by the author. I've been watching some of those, and he's got a man. Buzz Bissinger is quite the character. He will drop word bombs in any setting. It don't matter who's in the audience. So you got to kind of understand that he's a different kind of cat when you listen to him talk. But there's highlights of the movie. There's the coin toss, actual footage. There's game films of them from the 80s, grainy looking VHS out there. So you can go watch Booby run the ball if you want to. He was a big old upright. I don't know how tall he was. He looks like he's 6 feet in the film. He ran kind of upright and just trucked people, man. He was big and fast, and he wore those huge shoulder pads. And he was just out there.
Yeah, that's
He
what.
was just trucking dudes.
Yeah, that's what. I'm just sitting here looking at a picture now, and the big wide 1980s pads. Um, how did
With
we
the
ever
neck
play?
roll.
How did we ever play in those? Run in them.
Neck rolls, neck.
Yeah.
Now and the neck rolls, but
There's also a book out there of all the pictures taken during the research
Oh,
for
I
this
got to
book
find that.
that the photographer that was tagging along. There's I don't know. I read it's hundreds of pictures that
Yeah.
they took, and somewhere there's a book out there of those pictures. I saw that recently.
They did a 25th anniversary article in Sports Illustrated about it, and they sent a photographer to Odessa, and they took pictures of Chavez, Ivory Christian, the D end or linebacker, whatever he played, Winchell, and somebody else. They took pictures of them I mean, as 40-something-year-old men. That was pretty cool. But there's a lot of information still out there about that. And now I want to watch the TV series. There's a ton of young actors in that I've seen in other stuff, and I'm gonna go back and watch the series now.
The the series has more comic relief in it than the movie. The
It is
movie's
pretty
pretty serious.
serious.
This the TV series has some little comical. Have a couple characters in there that are pretty
By
funny
by
at
the way, the
times.
wife is the same wife, or it's the wife of the coach in the series and the movie, and the top booster guy is the same in both.
Right,
Same actor. Yeah.
right. Yep, same guy, basically same
And
character.
their team
Yeah,
is the Panthers in the TV series, and apparently the P on their helmet looks a lot like the Permian P. It's just even though they're blue and yellow for team colors, it looks like the same P to me. But
I don't
this
remember
guy
that book.
this guy could have
Yeah,
picked. I think what he found out in writing the book, at least, was that he could have picked just about any town in America, and he would have had a very similar experience as far as the football and the connection to the town and all that. But the city itself is a character in the book. Odessa, y'all know it, he goes into so much of the history and the boom and bust days of Odessa and how it affected
Hmm.
people. And then there's a whole thing in there about they didn't really integrate their schools until 1982, despite the federal government telling them to do that in the 60s or whatever. They didn't do it till 82. So there's a whole lot
Right.
of stuff in the background of this story. And he just caught lightning in a bottle, man. He picked the exact right location to do this one in. And he moved. The writer moved there. Moved his family there in July, and was at the first summer practice like 2 weeks later, and followed them every step of.
After the book, after the book came out, I don't think he was thought very highly of
No,
in the town of Odessa after that.
Well,
They thought he was coming in to do
puff
a
piece.
big tribute, yeah, tribute piece, and painted in a great light, but he did not.
I think it's the same way that these reality shows people get through and go, wait a minute, I didn't say that, and they're on camera saying it because they forgot
Yeah.
that the camera's there all the time. I think that's what
Hmm.
used to happen with these writers is that we studied these when I was in school. They're called immersion projects, is what we called them in school, where you go live in a community and write about it. I think they just forgot the guy was there doing anything. He just became part of the scene. And some of
Right.
the off color stuff that they said and talking, bad about some of the players and all that, I think they just forgot. I mean, he's just there. I think they kind of let their guard down eventually. It's not like they started
Yeah,
out.
you're not going to use this, are you?
Yeah, and the whole thing is before you publish something like that, you pretty much got to run it by everybody in there that you use, and they've got to verify they said those things, or you don't run it. So I guess they didn't care to some extent. So
Yeah, until it painted them in a bad
and then
light.
and, yeah,
right.
but I don't know if it did or didn't. In some ways, I think there's plenty of towns that would be proud of some of that stuff, but there's obviously some bad stuff in there that didn't make some people look very good at all. But he definitely captured a small town's relationship with their sports teams for sure. You could probably write this same story in Indiana about basketball and in Canada about hockey and
Right. Right.
whatever.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what else about it? Anything else, you guys? I've worn you out. I know. I knew it was going to be an hour and 15, and that's pretty much what we did.
I just reading a little excerpt here that I found. I found it interesting that you know Winchell and Chavez and a couple other guys actually went on and played college football,
Yeah.
but they lost interest after leaving Permian because they said it just wasn't the
I'm
same.
so glad you said that because I had a mental note to talk about that, and I just didn't do it. You're right. They said it was a letdown to go play college ball, most of them.
Yeah,
Nothing duplicated their
Wow.
Permian experience in college.
no bond, no bond, no friendship. You wasn't famous. You were just another kid trying to make a team.
There was even a specific story. I think it was Booby. Booby played for a year at junior college, but he lost all D1 offers. He goes to a junior college, and the
Hmm.
writer went with him through that season or something, or he showed up for homecoming at Booby's college, and there were 400 or 500 people in the whole stadium.
Yeah, went to Ranger College.
And Boobies
Ranger
and
College.
Boobies used to walking out to 19,000, and like I said, on a slow night they probably played in front of 10. And
Hmm.
so I'm glad you said that, Mark, because I forgot it. But the fact that college, Chavez went to Yale or Harvard or somewhere and played,
Harvard. Went to
Harvard,
Harvard.
became a
and
lawyer.
their crowds, and their
Became a lawyer. Played
and it
football
wasn't
up there.
exciting to him, not at all.
Yeah.
He actually got
He
his,
quit.
yeah.
He quit the team to play rugby. He started playing rugby.
And Winchell went to Baylor, and he was a walk on or something at Baylor, and he was third or fourth string and only lasted a year. And even he said it just wasn't the same. I mean, all these guys were kind of bored by the college
Yeah.
experience.
Ivory Christian
I
went on
think,
to play for TCU, but he quit after his freshman
yeah,
year.
he's the only one that played D1. Actually played D1, I think.
I think that kind of proves that they were undersized and not well thought of athletically and so forth, because they really didn't have a ton of guys get scholarships on a yearly basis. They had a few, but I think that tells you a lot about how they made their living on toughness and so forth as a
Hmm.
program. You know,
Strength and
strength.
speed.
Yeah, can't coach speed. So anyway, I love it. I love that story. I've probably read that book 6 or 8 times over the years. I'm glad I just went through it again because that's just the kind of story that I love, and it proves that the truth and what really happens is stranger than any fiction you could ever, or is better than any fiction you could come up with. Because if you wrote that out that way for Hollywood, they'd say, "Oh no, they've got to win," or whatever you want to change about it. There's no way that dude's dad was that mean to him. All this kind of stuff, but here it is in black and white that it actually all happened that way. So I find it kind of fascinating.
I think the movie took some liberties with the book just to make it more an interesting
For sure.
movie. You understand that,
Yeah.
but I think it
That's what
was.
Hollywood does
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, I think it was really close to what actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, you got 2 hours to work with, and you don't have time to delve into all the history of everybody. You got to show something that sort of quickly represents the point you're trying to get across.
Right.
So yeah, there's so much in the book about the Billingsley dad and the town and all that. But if
And
you said,
you know the racial
yeah, a lot
tensions
of
and
racial tensions, and it not just black white racial stuff. A lot of Hispanics in that town too. So there was,
yeah, it was
it,
mainly mainly Hispanic, like 5% African American. So
yeah, it had a lot. It was a melting pot in some ways, kind of town. And hey, let's be honest. You know, people who live in that part of the country, they're tough people, man. They make a hard living, most of them, if they're blue collar. So it has
hmm
its own kind of folks that grow up to play ball there, so to speak. So anyway, I
yeah,
love it.
and
I've always liked it. This didn't change my mind any. I thought they did a really good job focusing on what they should have for the movie. So all right, so I'm gonna kill the recording right about here.
Thank you for joining us on GenX Classic Sports, where nostalgia meets the thrill of the game. Tune in next time for more insightful discussions and memorable moments, brought to you by Pine Street Productions. Until then, stay passionate about sports and keep the memories alive.